back up a little bit since I got off my notes and say a couple of things. All right. So years ago, and I don't remember what year it was off the top of my head, there was another bishop synod that covered the family, and most often what happens about a year after these, the Pope will give what's called an apostolic exhortation. And this is what followed that particular one. Normally about a year and a half afterwards, that Pope John Paul II put out on the family. The role of the family in the modern world. And we're going to take a look at one paragraph out of that, and then we'll talk about it as we continue to go on for the next several months. But before I want to do that, I want to ask a couple of questions of y'all. First of all, how many of y'all are married or have been married ever? Okay, ever. All right. So when you got married, some of you more recent than others, did you go through how many of y'all went through some type of marriage prep? All right. Anybody not go through any type of marriage prep? Okay. What diocese were you in?
It was Dallas.
Okay.
It was a long time ago.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, really? Cool.
I mean, decades.
A while ago.
All right, so when you went through marriage prep, were you given a biblical explanation of the sacrament of marriage?
No.
Yes.
You were? Okay. Where was that? Here? The marriage prep here at St. Catherine proper? Okay. How about an explanation of the sacrament of marriage as a vocation? Here?
Here.
Okay. All right. How about a definition of love?
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was? How about a definition of marriage, period? All right. So I suspect that when Stacy and I were going to have our convalidation of our marriage, we also had to go through a marriage prep. We went through the what do they call it? Cana. It's not pre-Cana. It's I don't remember what they call it. It's some sort of something Cana. It was done through the diocese. It was a 2-day. I'm going to call it a little workshop for lack of anything else. It wasn't a retreat. That was done at the diocesan center, and it wasn't bad, but it was mostly focused on the kind of practical, more earthly temporal look at marriage. How to have an argument, how to make a budget, that sort of thing. But there really wasn't a lot of discussion about the sacrament itself, what it meant, what marriage meant, that sort of thing. Okay? Maybe they just assumed that people knew that already. I think it's a bad assumption. So I say that because if you listen to Catholic radio at all, how many of y'all listen to Catholic Radio 910? Okay, when they do open line talk, the majority of the calls that they get in on open line talk are about what? They're about marriage, annulments, and divorces. They are. When we had our Lost and Found session here at St. Catherine back last year, the majority of the questions that were asked, I don't know about your table, but at my table, it was about marriage, annulments, and divorce.
So who was the first guest speaker we brought in after that?
Somebody from the tribunal, right?
Yep.
And I bet there's still a lot of questions.
18 months later, there's not much mental retention. So
Well, yeah, I mean, and even if you had a 3-hour session, you can't answer all the questions. And here's the thing about it too, is that I know that, and I've got an answer for y'all. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we got together, there was a question about whether or not was a canon law question about whether or not you had to be confirmed before you got married. I have an answer for you. But before I give you that answer, one of the assumptions that people have, and Mark and I learned this in our canon law classes, we live in the United States of America where we have a judicial system that operates on a system called the precedent. Everybody know what that means? Maybe for the benefit of the one person who doesn't. Precedent means that they rely on previous court cases in order to interpret the law for the current case. All right. In theory, it's supposed to provide a system of
Legal creep.
say again?
Legal creep.
Yeah, but in theory, it's supposed to make it more efficient and more predictable in outcomes
Inconsistent.
and consistent. Okay?
When did they abandon that?
Yeah.
That's another discussion.
A legal creep.
Canon law does not operate that way. Canon law takes each individual case separately.
And applies it against the code.
Yeah, and applies it against the code. So the answer to your question, last time that we got together, comes from section 1065 of the canon law. And it says that must be confirmed first unless there's a grave inconvenience. Okay, so I don't remember how many of y'all were here, but the question was raised, do you have to be confirmed before you get married? So it appears from looking at canon law that you do unless there's a grave inconvenience. And I don't know what that means.
We have a prime example of that this year in RCA where the wife was born and raised Catholic but not confirmed. The husband was converting to Catholicism, and the wife had to get confirmed prior to or at the same time of the Easter Vigil in order for them to get married or convalidate.
In your research, what is the normal sequence of receiving sacraments?
In America or in
The
Europe?
way it's supposed to be, let's put it that way. You start with baptism, obviously. What comes
Well, it
next?
differs in,
The way it's supposed to be is somewhat geographic,
Okay.
but it's generally, well, in some places and then also like with the Greek Orthodox, it's all of it at the same time. As an infant, baptized, communion, confirmation, and as an infant. But in general, it's baptism, confirmation, or baptism, Eucharist, confirmation in the United States. But that was Catholic Church speaking, a recent development. I mean, like a few hundred years ago, but that's the regular order.
I would probably think it would be about the time that Pius X instituted children receiving communion when they reached the age of reason, which is about 7 years of age or first grade or something like that. And he created a whole new industry.
so if you guys like, we can have a session on some of the questions about canon law down the road. I didn't want this to turn into a canon law discussion, I just wanted to give you all an answer. And the other thing I'll tell you is this, is that almost all of the references to marriage that are in the catechism, and by the way, I have another copy of one today that I picked up at Half Price Books for $10, so if anybody wants it, it's brand spanking new. Retails for $25, got it for 10. So, paragraph 1612 through 1617.
One more time.
1612, 1612. Actually, the Sacrament of Marriage starts in 1601, but I'm going to just take a look at 1612 through 1617. But what I wanted to say is that almost all the passages that are referenced in the Catechism on the subject of marriage are taken or referenced from canon law. All right, so.